Chapter 1. The Line in the Sand. Mark Jackson had never believed that marriages collapsed all at once. That was a lie people told themselves because it was easier than admitting they'd ignored the slow erosion. The quiet distance, the divided attention, the way laughter began to belong somewhere else. He noticed patterns. He always had. At 35, Mark was the kind of man who didn't panic easily and didn't raise his voice to be heard. He paid attention instead. Attention told him far more than confrontation ever could. Lilly had been his partner for 6 years. Not perfect years, but good ones. Solid ones. Years built on conversation instead of conflict, patience instead of pride. They'd never needed dramatics to feel alive. They chose each other in 1,000 small ways until recently. Started 5 months earlier. A new hire at Lilly's office. A name that came up casually at first like any other coworker. Mark didn't stiffen when he heard it. He didn't bristle or interrogate. He simply noted how often the name returned. Too often. Lilly had always been present with him. Mentally. Emotionally. She listened the way people do when they care, not when they're waiting to speak. Lately, her attention fractured. Her phone lit up more frequently. Her laughter came quicker and lingered longer, but it wasn't directed at him. Mark never asked to see her phone. He didn't need proof. Proof was for men who didn't trust their instincts. He trusted his. The distance wasn't dramatic. That was the dangerous part. It was subtle enough to excuse, easy enough to rationalize. But Mark had seen the story play out in friends, coworkers, even family. It always began the same way, harmless connections growing quietly important. The day Lilly came home with shopping bags was the day something inside him went still. She was humming to herself, moving lightly through the house. When she passed him, Mark caught the scent of her good perfume, the one she saved for weddings and anniversaries. He looked up from the couch. "You smell nice." She smiled, distracted. "Thanks. Thought I'd switch things up." The bags followed. New outfits. Not scandalous, just intentional. Clothes chosen with consideration. Mark didn't feel angry. He felt resolved. That night, after dinner, he turned off the television and faced her fully. "Hey," he said calmly. "Can you sit with me for a minute?" She did, still unaware. "Sure. What's up?" Mark rested his elbows on his knees, fingers laced. "I need to say something, and I need you to hear me." Her smile faded slightly. "Okay. Before I do," he continued, "I need to warn you. What I'm about to say will probably make you uncomfortable. If your first reaction is to insult me or minimize it, that will tell me everything I need to know." Confusion crossed her face, then nerves. "Mark, what is this about?" "I've been paying attention," he said evenly. "For 5 months." She swallowed. "You talk about him more than you realize. You laugh at your phone more than you used to laugh with me. You're here, but your mind isn't." He held her gaze. "I know this story. I've seen it too many times." "That's not," she started. He raised a hand, not sharply. "Just enough. Let me finish." She nodded, eyes wide now. "It only ends 2 ways, he said. "You get your head on straight and remember you're married, or we say goodbye. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you where the line is." Her breath hitched. "I didn't do anything." "I know," he said. "And that's why we're talking now instead of later." She stared at him, shaken. "I'm not going to compete for my wife's attention against another man," Mark continued. "Our vows weren't vague. Forsaking all others wasn't symbolic. It was specific." Silence filled the room. "I'm going to stay with my dad for a few weeks," he said. "Not to punish you, to think, and to give you space to figure out what you want." Her voice trembled. "Mark, please. I'm not going to sit quietly while you fade from our marriage," he said gently. "You either want to be here for the right reasons, or you're wasting my time." He stood, kissed her forehead softly, and walked to the bedroom. By the time the door closed behind him, Lilly was still on the couch, panic blooming as understanding settled in. For the first time, she saw herself clearly. And she knew words wouldn't be enough. Chapter 2, The Quiet After. Mark's father lived in the kind of house that had never tried to impress anyone. It sat at the edge of a modest neighborhood, paint slightly faded, porch light permanently crooked. The inside smelled faintly of coffee, old books, and whatever meal had been cooked most often over the last 30 years. Comfort without performance. Mark stood in the doorway with his duffel bag in hand, suddenly aware of how tired he was. His father, Tom Jackson, looked up from the kitchen table where he was reading the same newspaper he read every morning. Even though Mark suspected he stopped absorbing the words somewhere around 2015. "Well," Tom said, folding it with deliberate calm. "You don't usually show up with a bag unless something's broken or you're fixing to break something." Mark exhaled. "Hey, Dad." Tom stood, pulled him into a firm hug, and patted his back once. "Guest room's made up. Coffee's hot. You hungry or just emotionally constipated?" Mark snorted despite himself. "Both, probably." "Good. Means you're human." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, Mark staring at the familiar scratches in the table. His father didn't rush him. Tom had learned a long time ago that silence was often an invitation. "I left Lilly tonight," Mark said finally. Tom nodded. "Temporarily?" Yes. Good. He took a sip of coffee. Permanent things should never be decided while you're still angry or still hoping. Mark smiled faintly. I wasn't angry. That, Tom said dryly, is sometimes worse. Lilly didn't sleep. She sat on the couch long after Mark left, replaying every moment of the last 5 months like a crime scene she hadn't realized she was contaminating. She hadn't cheated. That truth mattered, but not as much as it once had. Because she could feel how close she'd come to something quieter and more dangerous. Emotional outsourcing. Sharing pieces of herself out of convenience instead of intention. She walked into the bedroom and opened Mark's closet door. The absence hit harder than his words. She sat on the bed and pressed her palms into the comforter, grounding herself. Panic tried to take over, but Lilly forced it back with logic. Fear would make her defensive. Defensive would make her dishonest. Mark hadn't yelled. He hadn't accused. He hadn't begged. He'd drawn a line. And for the first time in her adult life, Lilly understood that love didn't always arrive with desperation. Sometimes it arrived with self-respect. She picked up her phone, stared at it, then deliberately turned it off. The next morning, Mark woke to the smell of bacon and the sound of his father muttering at the radio. You know, Tom said without looking up, most men who come back here after marriage trouble want me to tell them they're right. I don't need that, Mark said. Good, because you're not. Mark raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Tom flipped the bacon. You're right to have boundaries. You're right not to compete. But don't confuse decisiveness with detachment. You didn't leave to punish her. No. You left because you were afraid of what staying quietly would turn you into. Mark considered that. Yes. Tom nodded. That part's healthy. They ate in silence again. She didn't cheat, Mark said eventually. I know. She might not have even realized what she was doing until I said it. Probably. Mark frowned. So why does it still feel like betrayal? Tom shrugged. Because intention doesn't erase impact. And attention is currency in a marriage. You don't spend it elsewhere without consequence. Mark smiled ruefully. You always make it sound so damn simple. That's because it is, Tom said. Simple doesn't mean easy. At work, Lilly drew a line so sharply it startled even her. She kept conversations polite, brief, professional. When her coworker tried to continue their usual banter, she redirected. When he asked if everything was okay, she told him plainly that she needed distance. He looked confused, then slightly hurt. Lilly felt the discomfort and didn't soften it. At lunch, she called her mother. I messed up, Lilly said without preamble. Her mother, Denise, paused. How badly? Bad enough that Mark left. Silence. Then, come over tonight. By evening, Lilly sat at her mother's kitchen table alongside her Aunt Carol and her grandmother, June. 3 generations of women who had loved men imperfectly and learned things the hard way. June eyed her over her glasses. You didn't sleep with anyone, did you? No. Good, June said. That would have made this conversation shorter and louder. Carol leaned back in her chair. So what did you do? I stopped choosing him, Lilly said quietly. Denise nodded. That's harder to fix than a single bad decision. Carol tilted her head. But not impossible. June smiled thinly. Men like Mark don't leave because they want to. They leave because they know what staying costs them. Lilly swallowed. How do I fix it? You don't convince him, Denise said gently. You show him, consistently, without theatrics. Carol grinned. And you accept that he may still walk. June patted Lily's hand. Love isn't proven by how afraid you are of losing it. Lilly nodded, tears slipping free. I choose him. Good, June said. Now act like it. That night, Mark lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. He missed Lilly. He missed the way she curled her feet against his calves. He missed her terrible habit of stealing the blankets and claiming innocence. But he didn't miss feeling invisible. His phone buzzed once. A message from Lilly. I understand now. I'm not asking you to come back yet. I just needed you to know I'm choosing you with actions, not fear. Mark set the phone face down. For the first time since leaving, he felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief, but hope with conditions. Chapter 3, Council of Women. Lilly learned 2 things very quickly the morning after she spoke to Mark. First, turning off her phone did not quiet her mind. Second, resolve felt very different from confidence. She woke early, showered without lingering, and dressed in plain clothes, comfortable, unremarkable, intentional. When she caught her reflection, she paused. Not with judgment, with honesty. You don't get to be dramatic about this, she told herself quietly. You get to be deliberate. By 10 o'clock she was in her car, driving toward her mother's house with a knot in her stomach and a list of questions she hadn't yet figured out how to ask. Her mother's house was already full when she arrived. Aunt Carol's car was parked crooked in the driveway, as if she'd pulled in mid-thought. Lilly smiled despite herself. Carol did everything mid-thought. Inside, the kitchen hummed with familiar chaos. Coffee brewing, drawers opening and closing. The low murmur of voices layered with decades of shared history. Her grandmother June sat at the table like a queen holding court, back straight, glasses perched low on her nose. She looked up as Lilly entered. "Well," June said, "you look like a woman who's realized she can't talk her way out of something." Carol grinned. "That's the face, yeah." Lilly laughed weakly and set her purse down. "I'm not here to talk my way out of anything." "Good," her mother Denise said, handing her a mug. "Sit." They did not ease her into it. The women in Lily's family had never believed in gentle avoidance. They believed in clarity delivered with love and the occasional blunt instrument. "So," Carol said, leaning back, "you didn't cheat." "No. But you drifted." "Yes." June nodded. "Drifting is how people drown without splashing." Lilly wrapped her hands around the mug, grounding herself. "I didn't realize how far I'd gone until he said it out loud." Denise studied her carefully. "And when he said it, I knew he was right." Carol raised an eyebrow. "Immediately?" "Yes." June snorted. "That's inconvenient." "It is," Lilly admitted, "because now I can't blame him for anything." Denise smiled faintly. "Accountability has that effect." Lilly swallowed. "He left. Not angrily. Just decisively." June nodded approvingly. "Good man." That stung. "I know." Carol leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Here's the important part, Lilly. You want him back?" "Yes," Lilly said without hesitation. "Why?" Carol asked. The question landed heavier than she expected. "Because I love him," Lilly said quickly, then stopped herself. She exhaled. "And because I like who I am with him. And because I don't want a marriage built on default. I want it built on choice." Denise's expression softened. June watched closely. "And," Lilly continued, voice steadier now, "because I don't want him to come back because I panicked. I want him to come back because he believes me." June nodded slowly. "That's the right answer." Carol tilted her head. "Harder path." "I know." Denise reached across the table and squeezed Lily's hand. "Then listen carefully. You don't chase him. You don't beg. And you don't perform remorse like it's a show." "So what do I do?" Lilly asked. "You live like a woman who remembers she's married," Denise said simply. Carol smirked. "And you accept that he may still walk." That fear surfaced again, sharp and unwelcome. Lilly nodded anyway. "I understand." June tapped the table once. "Men like Mark don't need convincing speeches. They need consistency. They watch patterns. Break one bad pattern and replace it with a better one." Lilly took that in. "He said he wouldn't compete." "And he won't," June said. "So don't ask him to." Carol chuckled. "You know what won't work?" "What?" "Grand gestures. No letters written at midnight. No surprise visits. No emotional ambushes." Lilly grimaced. "I might have been considering a letter." Carol wagged a finger. "Burn it." They laughed, and the tension eased just enough to breathe. "What about time?" Lilly asked quietly. "How much do I give him?" June's gaze sharpened. "As much as he needs. And no more than you can give without losing your dignity." Denise nodded. "This isn't about proving you're afraid to lose him. It's about proving you choose him even when he's not there to reassure you." Lilly felt something settle into place. Not relief. Direction. "I set boundaries at work," she said. "Immediately." "Good," Carol said. "Awkward." "Very." June smiled thinly. "Growth usually is." Across town, Mark spent the afternoon helping his father replace a fence post that didn't strictly need replacing. "You're hammering like the post insulted you," Tom observed. Mark paused, wiped his brow. "Just restless." Tom nodded. "You're not waiting for an apology." "No. You're waiting to see who she becomes when you're not there to manage her feelings." Mark looked at him. "Exactly." Tom smiled faintly. "That's a dangerous test. It's the only one that matters." That evening, Lilly did not text Mark again. She cooked dinner for one and cleaned as she went. She went to bed early. She woke the next morning and followed the same pattern. At work, she was professional, present, focused. At lunch, her coworker tried to make a joke. She smiled politely and excused herself. It wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. 2 days later, Mark checked his phone and found a single message. "No rush. No pressure. I'm here when you're ready." He read it twice. Then he didn't respond. Not because he didn't care, but because, for the first time, he didn't feel chased or taken for granted. And that mattered more than reassurance. Chapter 4, Boundaries and Resolve. The problem with boundaries, Mark discovered, was not drawing them. It was living inside them once the adrenaline wore off. His father's house had a rhythm that didn't care about emotional upheaval. The coffee brewed at the same time every morning. The neighbor's dog barked at the same hour. Dinner happened whether Mark felt settled or not. That steadiness was both comforting and irritating. On the fourth morning, Mark sat at the kitchen table scrolling through emails he wasn't actually reading. His phone lay face down beside his coffee mug like a deliberate decision. "You're thinking too loudly," Tom said from the sink. Mark glanced up. "Did I sigh?" "No," Tom replied. "You're just vibrating." Mark leaned back in his chair. "I thought space would feel clearer." Tom dried his hands. "It usually does, after it feels empty." "That's not helpful." Tom shrugged. I don't aim to be. Mark stared at the window. She hasn't tried to convince me. Tom's mouth twitched. That's new. Yes, Mark said. And confusing. Why? Because part of me expected something. Tom nodded slowly. And the part of you that respects her? Mark sighed. Appreciates it. There you go, Tom said. Growth is rarely comfortable. Otherwise everyone would do it. At work, Lilly felt like she was relearning how to occupy space. She spoke when necessary, listened when appropriate. She stopped lingering in doorways and stopped checking her phone reflexively. The small behaviors were the hardest to undo because they'd felt harmless at the time. Her coworker noticed. So, he said one afternoon, leaning against the break room counter. Did I do something? Lilly met his eyes, calm and steady. No, but I did. He frowned. I don't follow. I crossed a boundary I shouldn't have, she said plainly. And I'm fixing it. There was no accusation in her tone. No apology either. He straightened. I didn't mean. I know, Lilly said. And that's why this is my responsibility. He nodded slowly. Okay. It was awkward. Stayed awkward. And that was fine. That evening, Lilly cooked one of Mark's favorite meals. Not because she planned to invite him over, but because it reminded her of the life she was choosing to protect. She ate alone, wrapped leftovers carefully, and cleaned the kitchen until it shone. When she finished, she sat at the table and resisted the urge to reach for her phone. Instead, she wrote a list. Not promises, not apologies, actions. Mark went for a run the next morning and realized halfway through that he hadn't done so out of anger. That surprised him. The ache in his chest eased with the rhythm of his feet hitting pavement. He wasn't running from something. He was running toward clarity. When he returned, his phone buzzed. A message from Lilly. No response needed. Just wanted you to know I set firm boundaries at work. I'm focusing on consistency, not persuasion. Mark stared at the screen longer than he meant to. She wasn't flooding him with reassurance. She wasn't asking for validation. She was informing him. He exhaled and typed back a single word. Noted. Felt insufficient. Felt honest. That weekend, Denise stopped by Lily's house unannounced. You look steadier, Denise observed, eyeing the neat counters and the absence of frantic energy. I feel steadier, Lilly said. Still scared, but grounded. Denise smiled. Good. Fear makes liars out of people. They sat with tea. I haven't asked him to come back, Lilly said. Denise nodded. That's restraint. I want him, Lilly said quietly. But I don't want him cornered. That's love, Denise replied. Not possession. Lilly hesitated. What if he decides this is easier without me? Denise reached across the table. Then you'll grieve. And you'll know you didn't manipulate the outcome. Lilly closed her eyes briefly. I hate how reasonable that sounds. Denise laughed. Welcome to adulthood. On Sunday evening, Mark sat on the porch steps watching dusk settle. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Lilly. I'm free Tuesday evening if you want to talk. If not, I understand. No urgency. No guilt. Mark leaned back, considering. For the first time since leaving, the question shifted. Not does she want me, but do I believe her? He typed. Tuesday. Coffee. 6. He stared at the screen, then added nothing else. Inside the house, Tom watched him with quiet satisfaction. Well? Tom asked. Mark stood. I agreed to talk. Tom nodded. Talking's good. It's not reconciliation. No, Tom said. It's evaluation. Mark smiled faintly. Exactly. For the first time, the space between him and Lilly didn't feel like a chasm. Felt like a bridge. Unfinished but intentional. Chapter 5, the first reach, the coffee shop Mark chose sat halfway between familiarity and neutrality. It wasn't their place. The one with the chipped mugs and the barista who knew Lily's order by heart. It also wasn't sterile or anonymous. It existed in that careful middle ground that suggested intention without nostalgia. Mark arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table near the window. He ordered black coffee and ignored the urge to check his phone more than once. When Lilly walked in, he noticed 3 things immediately. She wasn't overdressed. She wasn't tentative. She wasn't trying to read his face like a verdict. She spotted him, took a steadying breath, and walked over. Hi, she said. Hi, Mark replied. They stood there for half a second too long. Then both sat down at nearly the same time, missing the rhythm they used to have. The awkwardness wasn't painful, just unfamiliar. How are you? Lilly asked. Mark considered. Present. She nodded. That tracks. A barista interrupted with Lily's order. Mark noticed she hadn't asked him what he was drinking. He also noticed he didn't mind. Silence settled, not heavy, just cautious. I want to say something first, Lilly said. Mark leaned back slightly. Okay. I'm not here to convince you of anything, she continued. I'm here to answer questions honestly if you have them. And if you don't, I'm still glad you came. Mark studied her. No defensive tone. No rehearsed apology. That's appreciated, he said. She smiled faintly. I practiced saying it without sounding dramatic. He huffed a quiet laugh before he could stop himself. Points for self-awareness. I earned them the hard way. They shared a small smile, then let it fade naturally. You set boundaries, Mark said. Yes. And you didn't tell me about them immediately. No. Why? Lilly met his eyes. Because I wasn't doing it for a reaction. I was doing it because it needed to be done. Mark nodded slowly. That matters. I figured it might. He took a sip of coffee, buying himself a moment. You know I wasn't accusing you of cheating. I know, she said quickly. Then softer. You were accusing me of forgetting. Yes. She didn't flinch. You were right. That landed harder than any defense could have. I didn't wake up wanting someone else, Lilly said. I woke up wanting novelty. And instead of talking to you about that restlessness, I let it attach itself somewhere safer. Somewhere that didn't require vulnerability. Mark's jaw tightened, not in anger, but recognition. That's the part that scared me, he said. Not attraction. Distraction. I see that now. He leaned forward slightly. Why didn't you tell me you felt restless? Lilly exhaled. Because everything was good, and I didn't want to be the person who disrupts good just because it's not exciting. Mark considered that. Good isn't meant to anesthetize you. She smiled ruefully. I learned that too late. Not too late, he said. Just late. She nodded. They sat with that truth between them. I'm not ready to come home yet, Mark said gently. I didn't expect you to be. But I'm not closed either. That was more than she'd hoped for. I'm willing to rebuild, he continued. But I need to believe this version of you isn't temporary. It's not, Lilly said. And I know you don't trust words right now. Correct. So I'll keep showing up the same way, she said. Whether you're watching or not. He held her gaze. That's the right answer. A beat passed. Then Mark added, you also didn't cry. She blinked. Is that a criticism? No, he said. Just an observation. Past versions of this conversation would have included tears by now. Lilly smiled. I cried already. With my family. This version of me wanted to stay clear-headed. He nodded, impressed despite himself. They stood to leave. Thank you for meeting me, Lilly said. Thank you for not trying to manage my reaction, Mark replied. She paused. May I ask one thing? Sure. When you decided to leave, she asked, were you already halfway gone? Mark thought carefully. No. I left so I wouldn't become someone who stayed halfway. Her eyes softened. That makes sense. They parted without touching. Without promises. As Mark walked to his car, he realized something unexpected. He wasn't relieved. He was steady. And for the first time, that felt like enough to keep going. Chapter 6, Relearning Each Other. Mark did not tell his father about the coffee meeting right away. Not because it was secret, but because saying it out loud would give it a shape he wasn't ready to commit to yet. He went back to routine instead, morning coffee, a short run, helping with things around the house that didn't strictly need help. It was strange how quickly his body adapted to absence. That unsettled him more than he expected. On Wednesday evening, Lilly came home to an empty house that no longer felt accusatory, just quiet. She changed into comfortable clothes, cooked something simple, and ate at the table instead of the couch. She noticed the habits she'd slipped into over the years and began correcting them. Not out of guilt, but awareness. Later, she folded laundry she didn't need to fold yet. When her phone buzzed, she froze. A message from Mark. I'll be in the neighborhood Saturday morning. If you're open to a walk. She read it twice, then once more. Yes, she typed. I'll be ready. No heart emojis. No qualifiers. She exhaled and smiled at the wall. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of clear, mild weather that felt like a favor. They met outside the house, neither quite sure whether to greet each other with a hug. In the end, they settled for a brief, mutual smile that carried more meaning than touch would have. You look good, Mark said, then winced slightly. I mean, healthy. Lilly laughed. I'll take it. They started walking without a destination, letting the neighborhood set the pace. I've been thinking about us, Mark said after a few minutes. I figured. Not in a dramatic way, he added. More like an inventory. She nodded. Me too. What did you find? He asked. That I stopped asking questions, she said. About you. About us. I assumed stability meant permanence. Mark absorbed that. And I assumed noticing was enough. That as long as I was aware, things would correct themselves. She glanced at him. We both got comfortable. Yes, he said. And comfort isn't the enemy. Complacency is. They walked in silence for a block, the truth settling gently between them. Do you miss me? Lilly asked quietly. Mark didn't answer right away. Yes, but missing someone isn't the same as trusting them again. I know. I don't want to go back to how we were, he said. Even though parts of it were good. I don't either, she said. I want something more intentional, even if it's slower. He smiled faintly. You've always hated slow. I hated uncertainty, she corrected. I'm learning the difference. They reached the park at the end of the street and sat on a bench, leaving a careful inch of space between them. I'm not asking you to move back yet, Lilly said. I'm asking if you're willing to let this evolve without rushing the ending. Mark looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't negotiating. She was offering. Yes, he said. I can do that. Her shoulders relaxed, just slightly. They sat there longer than planned, talking about mundane things, work projects, his father's stubborn refusal to replace aging appliances, her aunt's unsolicited dating advice. You know, Mark said dryly, your Aunt Carol once tried to set me up with her hairdresser. Lilly groaned. I apologized for that. She said you were probably emotionally distant by now. Lilly winced. That feels targeted. He laughed genuinely, and the sound surprised them both. As they stood to leave, Mark hesitated. I'm proud of you, he said, for how you're handling this. She met his eyes. I'm proud of you too, for not settling for half presents. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. As Mark walked away, he realized something else had shifted. He wasn't bracing anymore. He was participating. Chapter 7. Choosing, not clinging. Consistency, Mark learned, was loud in the quietest ways. It showed up on Tuesday evenings when Lilly didn't text to ask how his day was, but sent a brief note instead, thinking of you. No reply needed. It showed up in the absence of emotional whiplash, in the steady way she let him set the pace without trying to manage. He noticed everything. He noticed that she stopped filling silence with reassurance, that she didn't fish for compliments or updates, that when they did talk, she didn't revisit old ground unless he did first. That restraint mattered more than any apology ever could. On a Thursday evening, Mark found himself back at Lily's house for the first time since he'd left. He stood on the porch longer than necessary, listening to the sounds inside, the clink of a pan, the hum of music low enough to be background instead of performance. When she opened the door, she didn't step forward immediately. Hi, she said. Hi. You're early, she added. Old habit. She smiled. Come in. The house looked the same. That unsettled him. Not because he wanted visible change, but because he realized how much meaning he'd assigned to the smallest details. I made dinner, Lilly said. Nothing fancy. And if you'd rather not eat here, I can pack it up. No, he said. Here is fine. They ate at the table, not the couch. Mark noticed that too. This is good, he said, gesturing with his fork. You didn't overthink it. I did once, she admitted. Then I stopped. He smiled faintly. Progress. They talked easily but not carelessly. No reminiscing. No future casting. Just present tense truth. At one point, Mark glanced toward the hallway and hesitated. You don't have to, Lilly said quietly. I know, he replied. Thank you for saying it anyway. That acknowledgement, that she recognized the weight of invitation, sat heavily and kindly between them. After dinner, they stood awkwardly in the kitchen, neither quite ready to end the evening, neither willing to extend it artificially. I want to ask you something, Lilly said. Mark nodded. Okay. Are you staying away because you don't trust me? She asked. Or because you don't trust yourself not to rush back into familiarity? The question surprised him with its precision. Both, he admitted. But mostly the second. She nodded. That's fair. I don't want to mistake relief for resolution, he said. I wouldn't want you to. She leaned against the counter, relaxed but attentive. For what it's worth, I'm not trying to win you back. I know. I'm trying to deserve you if you choose to return. He met her gaze. That distinction matters. They stood there a moment longer. Then Mark reached for his jacket. I should go. Okay. She didn't follow him to the door. She let him leave like a man who wasn't being monitored. Outside, Mark paused on the porch, the night air cool and steady. Lilly, he said. She stepped forward. If I come back, he said carefully, it won't be because things are calm. It'll be because I believe calm won't make us complacent again. She nodded once. That's the marriage I want too. He didn't kiss her. But when he walked away, the absence didn't ache the way it once had. It felt purposeful. 2 weeks passed. Not dramatically, just deliberately. Mark spent more time at his own house again, fixing small things, reclaiming space without occupying it. Lilly continued exactly as she had, no escalation, no retreat. One evening, Mark's father watched him pack a small overnight bag. Where you headed? Tom asked. My house, Mark replied. Tom raised an eyebrow. That's new. I need to see how it feels, Mark said. Alone, but not apart. Tom nodded. That's a good test. It's not a decision. No, Tom agreed. It's information. Lilly was watering plants when Mark texted. I'm staying at the house tonight. She read it, felt the familiar flutter, and then let it settle. Okay, she replied. I'll be home if you want to stop by. If not, I understand. Mark stared at the message, something easing in his chest. He drove home, unlocked the door, and stood in the entryway for a long moment. The house didn't accuse him. It welcomed him. Later that night, he found himself dialing Lily's number without rehearsing what he'd say. Hi, she answered. Hi, he said. I'm home. There was a pause. Not tense, just full. Do you want company? She asked. Or solitude? Mark smiled into the phone. Company, he said. But only if it's intentional. I can do intentional, she replied. When she arrived, they sat together on the couch, close but not clinging. Comfortable without being careless. Mark rested his arm along the back cushion, not touching her. And for the first time he felt the decision forming, not out of fear of loss but confidence in choice. Not yet spoken, but real. Chapter 8, The Long View. Mark woke before Lilly did, which was unusual enough that it took him a moment to realize where he was. Morning light filtered through the curtains at an angle he recognized instantly. Their bedroom, his side of the bed, the familiar weight of the house settling into itself. He lay still, listening. Lily's breathing was even, deep, the kind of sleep that came from emotional exhaustion rather than comfort. He didn't reach for her. Not yet. He wanted to sit with the feeling first. He had come home 3 nights earlier with a bag and no declaration. There had been no dramatic reunion. No vows renewed in whispered urgency. He'd stood in the doorway, and Lily had looked up from the kitchen table, surprise flickering across her face before she smoothed it away. You're back, she'd said. I am, he'd replied. Not because things feel safe, because they feel honest. She had nodded once. That's enough for me. And it had been. Now, in the quiet morning, Mark understood the difference between returning and retreating. He hadn't come back to reclaim comfort. He'd come back to participate again. Lily stirred, blinking awake. Hey, she murmured. Hey. She smiled sleepily, then paused, awareness settling in. You okay? Yes, he said, and meant it. They lay there for a moment longer. Then Lily rolled onto her side, propping herself up on an elbow. Coffee? She asked. Please. She slid out of bed without ceremony, pulling on a sweatshirt. Mark watched her go, noticing the absence of tension. She wasn't gauging him. She wasn't waiting for approval. She was just being. That felt new. In the kitchen, Lily moved with unhurried familiarity. Mark joined her, leaning against the counter, watching her pour coffee without asking how he liked it. You remember, he said. She smiled. Some things stick. They sat at the table, knees brushing lightly. Mark didn't pull away. I want to say something, he said after a few minutes. Lily looked up. Okay. I'm not pretending this didn't happen, he said. I'm not filing it away as a resolved conflict. I wouldn't want you to, she said. But I am choosing to move forward, he continued. Not back. Forward. Her expression softened. Me too. I need us to stay curious, he said. About each other. About ourselves. I don't want comfort to turn into autopilot again. It won't, she said. Then, more carefully. And if it starts to, I want you to tell me before you have to leave to be heard. He nodded. That's fair. She hesitated. I also want to be allowed to be imperfect without panicking that it means I'm losing you. Mark considered that. I can promise you this. I won't disappear silently. If I'm struggling, you'll know. She exhaled, relief clear but contained. That's all I need. Later that morning, they tackled small domestic things together. Laundry, groceries, a leaky faucet that Mark fixed with unnecessary precision. It felt oddly intimate, rediscovering each other in the mundane. At one point, Lily watched Mark rearranging the spice rack. You know, she said, amused. You're putting cumin in alphabetical order again. He paused. It's efficient. It's obsessive. Both things can be true. She laughed, the sound easy and unguarded. That afternoon, Denise stopped by unexpectedly. Well, she said, surveying the scene. Mark on a step stool, Lily handing him a wrench. This looks promising. Mark smiled. Hi, Denise. She hugged him without hesitation. Good to have you back. I didn't leave permanently. I know, she said. But you returned intentionally. That counts. Lily rolled her eyes affectionately. She's very pleased with herself. As I should be, Denise replied. I raised a woman who corrected course instead of doubling down. Mark glanced at Lily. She did. Denise smiled. Don't mess it up. No pressure, Mark said dryly. After Denise left, Lily leaned against the counter. She likes you more now. I'll try not to let it go to my head. That evening, they cooked dinner together, moving around each other with renewed awareness. Mark caught Lily watching him at one point. What? He asked. She shrugged. I forgot how much I like doing life with you. He met her gaze. Me too. They ate slowly, talking about future plans without locking them into certainty. Possible trip. A maybe someday renovation. Nothing rushed. Nothing assumed. After dinner, they sat on the couch, legs tangled loosely. Mark rested his arm around her shoulders, not as a claim, but an invitation. Mark, she said quietly. Yes. Thank you for not staying when it would have made you smaller. He squeezed her shoulder. Thank you for not chasing me when it would have made us dishonest. They sat there as the evening deepened, the house warm around them. Later, as they prepared for bed, Lily hesitated at the doorway. I know things feel good right now, she said, but I don't want us to mistake peace for permanence. Mark smiled. I won't. She nodded. Good. They climbed into bed together. Closer this time, familiarity reclaimed without entitlement. As the light went out, Lilly reached for his hand. He intertwined their fingers, not because he was afraid to lose her, but because he chose her, and that, Mark knew, was the only version of love worth keeping.